All right, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to be looking at Module 23, so storing and retrieving memories, continuing on with this idea of how the heck do we get the information that's coming in from our senses into our minds. And yeah, as always, you can find the PowerPoints in the D2L, the same place you found this video. You can also find this module on page 275 of our book. So if you want to follow along with the book, that's where you can take a look at that. Make sure that you listen for the 4 random facts throughout the lecture as we go, just like normal. And also don't forget to do the quiz for the lecture, but also for the chapter as well. Okay. Let's see. I think that's everything. So let's get rolling. So storing and retrieving memories, slide 2. Memory storage. Our capacity for storing long-term memories is essentially limitless. For all intents and purposes, basically, our brain, we don't run out of space. Okay. And this totally goes against the idea, like you see the old cartoons where, like, you're like, oh no, we need room to store this, and so they start chucking out other things. That's not how the brain works. The brain, if you don't access things very often, it can bury things. Basically, it'll become less and less easily accessed or accessible. So I guess one way you could look at it is like if you had like an infinite warehouse, right? And you had something in the very back and you very rarely went and got it, things would pile up in front of it and it would be harder to get to. So to some extent, that's true in the brain. But we don't seem to lose anything unless you get like smacked on the head. Okay. And even then, it's questionable if we lose it or if we just lose the ability to track it down. It's kind of like having a library and you lose the back in the old days, the Dewey Decimal System, right? You have all the little cards that you shuffle through. I don't know if any of you are young enough to remember or old enough to remember that, but back when you would go to a library, you look for a book, you used to go through cards and to find it, and it would tell you where to get it. You've lost that deck, essentially, or you've lost the ability to search your computer for a specific thing, potentially. That might be one way to do it. But anyway, yes, our memory storage is, for all intents and purposes, limitless. We could remember an nearly infinite amount of information and things. So slide 3, retaining information in the brain, part 1. Despite the brain's vast storage capacity, we do not store information as libraries store their books in single, precise locations. Wouldn't that be nice if you had everything just stored away perfectly, right? Memory, you have tricks maybe that you can just easily access it. That's not how it works, though. They're all interconnected and interspersed throughout the mind, throughout the brain. So instead, brain networks encode, store, and retrieve the information that forms our complex memories. That is, the brain distributes the components of a memory across a network of locations in the brain with multiple trigger points. So rather than thinking of it like a library, picture it more like a spider web, where you pluck one string and it causes a ripple effect that basically tags into all these different points of it. But this is a nearly infinitely large spider web where each string can be interconnected or not to any other point of all of the experiences you've had in your entire life. Okay, so some of the brain cells that fired when we experience something fire again when we recall it. So if you're thinking about a time when you maybe were running, okay, if you picture yourself running, the parts of the brain that fire when you run are also firing when you're remembering yourself running. Same if you're playing a sport, music, anything. If you think about a given thing that you do, the brain is going to fire in a similar way to when it is that you actually do it. Which shows to some extent that it is, again, it's stored in different portions of the brain. And in a lot of ways, it's actually reconstructing an event that happened in the past. So you're retelling yourself the story that basically allows you to tie it in and create the memories that we have. Okay. 4, retaining information in the brain, part 2. We have 2 conscious memory systems. We have the semantic memory, which is explicit memories of fact and general knowledge, and episodic memory, or explicit memory of personally experienced events. And both of these are going to be your conscious abilities. Okay. They're tied to the hippocampus. So if you look on page 276, you can see a picture of the hippocampus that shows like a little kind of greenish brain with 2 little orangey shrimp-looking things. The little shrimp things are basically the part of the brain that figure out where memories should go, the hippocampus. It's a neural center located in the limbic system, which registers and temporarily holds elements of explicit memories before moving them to other brain regions for long-term storage. And that's actually part of when it does that is when you sleep. When you're sleeping, if you have a good night's rest, you're going to probably be able to recall things from the previous day more easily, because essentially the brain has had time to sort through and store away that information. So memory consolidation is the neural storage of long-term memories. All right. So semantic memory, again, it's going to be those basic facts, right? 2 + 2 = 4. I'm still on slide 4. 2 + 2 = 4. I'm going blank. My memory is failing me. If you remember like a Beatles song or something like that, like something specific, right? That's going to be a semantic memory. Episodic memory would be like remembering back to their 10th birthday party and what happened there. Okay. It's a personally experienced event, not just a fact. And so it's a story of an occurrence that happened to you that you can then share with other people and talk about it. Okay. Slide 5. But before we go into slide 5, I'm going to give you the first random fact. Humans have been performing dentistry, working on your teeth, since around 7000 BC. That's the earliest record we have, or evidence of people working on teeth. Like you can see some drilling and stuff done on teeth. With that, because of that, it's actually considered one of the oldest professions in the world. So interesting thing. Dentistry is very, very old. So for anyone who's going for becoming a dental assistant or a dental hygienist, there you go. You're getting to go into a field that's ancient. But okay, explicit memory system, the hippocampus. Explicit memories for facts and episodes are processed in the hippocampus. Orange structures, again, those little shrimp things. It's showing the image that we see on page 276. And they're fed to other brain regions for storage. Okay. And again, that's generally going to be happening. It's doing most of its work during sleep. This is also why the things that you, as the day goes, okay, let's say you're an average day, you sleep for 8 hours and you wake for 16. The things that happen the closest to sleep at the end of the day will be remembered the most clearly, typically. Okay. Now, if it goes too long, if let's say you stay awake for like 36 hours or 48 hours or something, at that point, the brain actually will begin to kind of scramble the memories, and you might end up experiencing like blackout periods during that time where your memory has failed. And that's essentially what alcohol and things like that do also. It disrupts the hippocampus and its ability to store and maintain and store information until it can kind of sort it away. And so, yeah, so that's where those areas fail. Okay. Yeah, that's essentially how so the things that happen closest to sleep, it's the freshest in the hippocampus. It's at the top of the pile, so it gets stored away the most accurately. Things that happened earlier in the day get stored away a little bit less, or before the nap or whatever like that. Sometimes if you're wanting to store something away, taking a nap, it's actually a really good way. If you study it and then take a sleep break, it can actually make it easier to recall it later on. So I'm giving you permission to take naps as a college student. So there you go. 6, implicit memory system, cerebellum and the basal ganglia. The cerebellum plays an important role in forming and storing implicit memories created by classical conditioning, right? So those things that are unconscious, they're just, you make these unconscious associations between two stimuli, and that's that connection there, right? Pavlov's dogs and all that. The basal ganglia is a deep brain structure that involved in motor movement, facilitates formation of our procedural memories for skills, playing instruments, metalworking, welding, that's which is metalworking, working on cars, art, baking, cooking, all those kinds of things that are the motion that is connected to the body movements. Those are going to be processed in the basal ganglia. Conscious memory of the first 3 years is blank, right? I talked about this a little bit, a teeny tiny bit in the last one. Infants, they found they actually do have memory. There are some basic memories, but due to the lack of language and the brain just not developing or not being mature physically and not having developed enough, the memories are hard to recall. So the episodic memories, for example, will pretty much be non-existent from those at least first 2 to 3 years of life. There's some people who claim that they have like very good memories of before 3, around 2, say. Generally, though, those are not accurate because the brain just has not developed fully. So you might have some memories. A lot of times those could actually be imprinted upon you due to someone telling you stories about a time and seeing pictures and things like that. But the memory itself oftentimes is not accurate if it exists at all. Command of language and well-developed hippocampus is needed for such memory, and that's where the issue is. And the hippocampus is one of the last brain structures to mature fully. It's actually one of the last brain structures, just to mature to the point where it's actually usable, which is why we begin to have stronger memories around 3. Generally gets pretty good around 5 or 6. You can have some pretty decent recall of that period of life. I've noticed a lot of adults, once you get past like age 20-ish or so, from 8 years old and above, there seems to be a very strong tendency to be able to recall information well. Before 8 years old, it's fuzzy for most people. And then again, below 3 and it's almost non-existent, or it is completely non-existent. So, okay. 7, the amygdala, emotions and memory. Excitement or stress triggers hormone production and provokes the amygdala, which is 2 emotion processing clusters in the limbic system, to engage memory. Let's see, do I have a picture coming up? There's a picture coming up, but if you look on page 277, you can see where the amygdala is kind of tucked away in the older portions of the brain, down in the center, right there near the brain stem. So kind of on the bottom of page 277. And then if you're on the PowerPoints, it's coming up on the next slide. Strong emotions, or stress responses especially, are oftentimes going to trigger this, and basically it's going to begin to store away. It's going to start recording more information more quickly, because when you're experiencing stress, it's probably an important event, right? It might be an important, like you're just trying to keep yourself alive, but in any case, it's something that's worth putting forward and holding on to potentially, so you can avoid it hopefully in the future. Emotions often persist with or without conscious awareness. You have this emotional response, and you might be aware of the fact that you're feeling it. Right? There can be a time where you can feel anger building, and you're aware of it. Other times it feels like it's just boom there. It probably has been building, but we were consciously unaware of the fact that our emotions were building up inside of us. Right? We had that physiological response, and then we haven't reacted to it yet. Emotional arousal causes an outpouring of stress hormones. The hormones lead to activity in the brain's memory-forming areas. Again, getting you ready for it, just in case. It needs to hold track of things to make sure that it can avoid it in the future. Flashbulb memories are going to be clear memories of emotionally significant moments or events, occur via emotion-triggered hormonal changes and rehearsal. If you struggle from PTSD, this is oftentimes connected to various flashbulb memories potentially. This is also going to be those things where you can remember the exact moment and what everything was looking like when you hear something that was extremely stressful. So for older people like myself, like 9/11 might have been one, right? If you were aware of that. It's weird that college students today might not have been alive during 9/11, but yeah, that was a big one, right? I have a very distinct memory of like walking down the stairs in our house, my mom sitting on a footstool, staring at the TV, with tears coming down her face, and just kind of that realization that something bad has happened. For older people, it might be like the Kennedy assassination. Any kind of a big event like that. Oftentimes, you'll have a flashbulb memory of the moment you found out about it. Maybe your favorite actor died, or you just found out your dog died, or something like that. And you have this crystal clear memory of what was happening at that moment. Okay, that's a flashbulb memory. Okay. Then next slide 8. We got a picture of the brain, frontal lobes, where we do all of our mental processing, basically, or a good chunk of it. The basal ganglia is that little kind of bluish front end there by where the blue line is. Amygdala is the purple bit, Hippocampus, the little blue thing, and the cerebellum, the little like baseball. It's the little brain at the base of the brain there. Frontal lobes, okay, are going to be where we store away or where we seem to process our explicit memories. So it's the part of the brain. This is where really our sense of consciousness really flows from right behind your forehead, essentially. That chunk of the brain there. It's also the part of the brain that helps you with planning for future events and all these things. So it seems to be where our working memory lives, right? Or where our brain is processing information coming in through our senses and are pulling up the past and kind of combining them together to help us navigate the now. Okay. The cerebellum and the basilar ganglia is where implicit memory formation occurs. So not explicit, but implicit. And then the amygdala is where emotion-related memories are formed. So again, the brain, there's not like this is the one spot where all memory happens. It's kind of spread out throughout the entire brain. And then it's stored away in different places also, connected to the various aspects there. Okay. Random fact number 2. This is what I thought was kind of funny. Canada eats more mac and cheese than any other nation in the world. Like pound for pound per citizen kind of a thing. They eat more than anywhere else. They like their mac and cheese in Canada. All right, slide 9. Synaptic changes. Long-term potentiation, or LTP, is an increase in a synapses firing potential after brief rapid stimulation. So after LTP, the brain will not erase memories. This basically kind of, it gets flooded with a charge, or it builds the pathways stronger, and the memory is then in place. Again, short of having like severe brain damage, it's there. Okay, it's believed to be a neural basis for learning and memory. It's kind of what's going to happen at the most basic cellular level of how we are able to store this information away in this relatively small space, right? Our heads aren't that big. My head is huge, but not, compared to how much information is inside it, my brain is quite small. Candle and Schwartz, 1982, observed synaptic changes during learning in the neurons of the California sea slug. You can see an image of that in the next slide, but you can also see an image of that on page 278 in the book. So sea slugs have exceptionally simple neural systems, and because of that, it makes them more easily studied than humans. It's very complex. So they can see essentially when pathways are forming and things to some extent in live time. They were able to pinpoint the changes in the sea slug's neural connections. With learning, more serotonin is released and cell efficiency is increased. So there are several different neurotransmitters that seem to be directly connected to our ability to learn. So you have an increase of them. As long as it's not overwhelming, it can make us much more efficient overall in our ability to learn new material and comprehend what's going on. Okay. So slide 10, we have the aplysia. Aplysia is the California sea slug, which neuroscientist Eric Kendall studied for 45 years. He has increased our understanding of the neural basis of learning and memory. On this image, you can actually find this image on page 279. Okay. And it's an image from under an electron microscope. They put some coloring in it to make it easier. There is no color at this size in real life. But it shows one receptor site, which is the gray matter, okay, in this picture, reaching toward the sending neuron, the red. Okay. That's in image A. That's the simple. So if you're looking at the book or if you're looking on the slide, that's the basics there. In image B, we have after an LTP event has occurred, okay, the receptor sites have doubled. So the ability for that neuron to communicate with the other neuron has just doubled in its efficiency. Okay. It increases sensitivity for detecting the presence of neurotransmitter molecules that may be released by the sending neuron with this, right? You got double the uptake points. So yes, so in fact, then this is a memory essentially forming in the sea slug. Okay. Slide 12 are two memory systems. We got two ways of basic processing memory. We have memory processing, which is the main part. You have automatic and you have effortful. Automatic can be implicit memories, right? It doesn't take any conscious recall. You just do it, right? So it's processed in the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. Space, time, frequency, where you ate dinner yesterday, right? If I say like, where'd you eat? And you can like kind of pull back and think about where it was. Motor and cognitive skills, such as riding a bike, be playing an instrument, juggling, right? All these kinds of things, hitting metal just right, whatever, doing fencing. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. These motor skill type things that don't take to think about it, right? If you can do gymnastics, you've learned how to move your body through space more easily, things like that. Okay, and then classical conditioning, the reaction to a dentist office, for example, right? We learn to associate the smell of a dentist office maybe with getting our teeth worked on, and maybe that's unpleasant, so therefore you might have like a fear response to some extent, or a discomfort response at least, just from the smell of a dentist office, for example. Okay. Oh yeah, or lemonade and the bell ringing if you happen to do that experiment on yourself. So that's the one side of it, right? It doesn't take any, we don't have to actually consciously be thinking about it for that to happen. It just occurs. On the other side, the effortful memory processing, we have explicit memories, which are declarative with conscious recall, right? I'm able to actually bring it forward and then tell somebody about it. The declarative is basically connected to that, or explicit memories. It's something that I can share. So it's a story that I can tell. It's a specific piece of information that I can give. It's what I am doing right now in this lecture, right? I am declaring knowledge that I have stored away in my brain. So it precedes in the hippocampus and the frontal lobes. It is more involved in our conscious parts of the brain rather than those deeper subconscious parts. It's going to be connected to semantic memory, such as facts and general knowledge, like this chapter's concepts, what we're talking about right now. And episodic memory, again, those stories that you have personally experienced, like that one time that you were camping with your family and you fell in the lake, or Uncle Tony fell in the lake, or whatever. Okay, totally made up those names and stuff. So, but right, that's the kind of thing where you're like, remember that time when you get together with friends that you've had a lot of life experience with, and the stories begin. That's episodic memory. Okay. 13, memory retrieval cues. Memories are held in storage by a web of associations. Retrieval cues serve as anchor points for pathways to memory suspended in this web. Like I said, if you can kind of picture it like as a giant spider web, it makes a little bit better sense. The joint points of that spider web then are essentially the things that we need to trigger a certain memory. This is part of the reason why you're like, oh, I need to go do something, and you get up and you walk out of the room and you get to the room that you were going to do the thing, and all of a sudden you can't remember what it was you were going to do. The memory cue is no longer present, right? Something in that space that you just left was triggering that memory. And then if you got distracted or something along the way, that memory flies out of your head. Okay. So when you encode into memory, didn't, but the thought that we got you up and got you moving is gone. When you encode into memory the name of the person sitting next to you in class, okay, you associate it with other bits of information about your surroundings, mood, seating position, and so on, which is why you might actually be really close with somebody in classroom, right? I had some class friends that we were really good friends together. When I saw them outside of the classroom, sometimes I didn't recognize them because the surroundings were wrong, right? The memory cues for who they are and their name and all those things were embedded partially in that person, but also partially in the environment where I always saw that person. And so when you see them outside of that area, it can even feel kind of weird, and you might not be able to recall names and things like that. All of those connected basically are where this can become an issue. Okay, so the best retrieval cues come from associations formed at the time a memory is encoded. If you can make the connection with your senses and things and the memory as it is happening and as it is first becoming connected in there, once you experience a similar thing, you'll have that memory thrown back in, like comes back to your consciousness. Okay. Example, and I think I might have given this example already, but I'm going to go ahead and use it again because it really is fitting for this area. I was at a whiskey tasting with a friend, and one of the whiskeys we tasted, and I was like, they asked you, what does it make you think of, kind of thing, and he was like, grandma, and we were like, grandma, and even he was like, what? Why does this whiskey make me think of grandma? Well, as we explored that whiskey and that flavor, he recognized that it was the whiskey had kind of a nutmeg cinnamon under flavor. And it wasn't, there is no cinnamon or nutmeg in it, but there was something that was reminiscent of it. And for him, those two smells and flavors are grandma. Like that, there's all the memories of her baking and around the holidays and things like that. And so that connection, right? That was a retrieval cue to remind him of his grandmother. Okay, so priming, activation often unconsciously of particular associations in memory. It's those points, right, where we're getting ready to pull a given memory, given the stimulants that are in our environment. Okay, 14, retrieval cues, part 1. So priming, for example, after seeing or hearing rabbit, we are later more likely to spell the spoken word hair, spelled either H-A-I-R or H-A-R-E, like hair on your head, H-A-I-R, or hair running around, or rabbit, H-A-R-E. We're more likely to spell it the way as spelling like a rabbit. Okay. So associations, unconsciously activated related associations. That's considered the priming. Okay. Third random fact before we move on to the next slide. Pepperoni is actually an American cured meat. The first use of the word was in 1919. A lot of people think it's Italian. It's actually American. Pepperoni is in some ways more American than like hot dogs, which is weird because hot dogs were originally made in Germany. But anyway, or so they say. I don't know. The history of cured meats, weird stuff. Okay, 15. Retrieval cues, part 2. Context-dependent memory. Recall of specific information improves when the context present at encoding and retrieval are the same. You might be in a similar situation of what the thing happened, and that memory comes flooding back. And that memory, you haven't thought about that memory for years, possibly, but it was stored away there, waiting for just the right cue, right? So given the context you're currently in, it pulls it forward because it sees that there's an association to it from what happened at that time. Cues and context specific to a particular memory will be most effective in helping recall. So if you can find a way, again, to make those connections intentionally, you can actually make recall more easily accomplished with different things. Okay. 16, retrieval cues, part 3, state-dependent memory. Emotions that accompany good or bad events become retrieval cues. So maybe certain memories maybe you had something happen when you were really angry. Okay. And you've kind of forgotten about it. But for some reason, you feel anger rising again, and that memory comes flooding back. Okay. And maybe so what that could potentially do then is increase the anger as well as making that memory suddenly accessible to you. Mood congruent memory is the tendency to recall experiences that are consistent with one's current good or bad mood. So if you're in a good mood, you're actually more likely to remember all the good things that have happened to you than the bad things. And if you're in a bad mood, you're much more likely to remember all the bad things that have happened to you than the good things. So it can kind of compound things, right? So if I'm feeling kind of down in the dumps, and people are like, just think about your life. And like basically my mind starts pulling up all these lousy things that have happened to me in the past, right? Which just makes me sink deeper into the dumps. And then as I sink deeper, my brain keeps pulling up more and more sad things that have happened. On the other hand, if I'm feeling really good, I'm having a great day, and I'm like thinking about my past, my brain is going to be pulling up all the times I was successful and all these great things happened, and it's going to increase my happiness overall typically. Okay. So the mood will oftentimes be connected to the emotion that gets pulled from it. Again, if I feel angry, I'll be more likely to pull at times when I felt angry in the past and all that. So passions are exaggerated. In a bad mood, we may read someone's look as a glare and feel even worse, right? We're more likely to assume things because we put our emotions onto the things outside of ourselves. In a good mood, we may encode the same look as interest and feel even better because of how we interpret that thing. And we're going to look at all those emotions and stuff in the next section, not the next chapter, but the next section of modules after this. Slide 17, and the last random fact before we get there. Walter Hunt, an American, invented the safety pin back in 1849. There you go. Safety pin was invented in 1849. Before that, you just had straight pins and lots of stabbing of yourself in your fingers. But anyway, 17, the serial position effect. So this is an example. We have Pope Francis here getting introduced to a whole bunch of dignitaries and things, what they found is that the two groups that you're going to be most likely to be able to recall. So if let's say I have 10 people, I get introduced to all 10 of them. I have a fairly good chance of remembering the very first person I get introduced to. It's a decent chance. But I have a very, very good chance of remembering the very last person I was introduced to, if I am asked to do so right after they have all introduced themselves to me. So like, let's say like 10 minutes goes by, and they're like, can you give me the names? There's a good chance I could recall the last person, and there's a decent chance I could recall the first person. If time has elapsed, so I don't know, 20 minutes, an hour down the road, right? And you ask me, or like even the next day, you ask me to recall people's names, I am more likely to recall people that were introduced to me first, and the last people basically fade out. Okay. And this is considered the serial position effect, this tendency to recall. We recall the last bit of information, if it's recent, best, but we recall the first bit of information, if it's been some time has passed, best on a given list. Okay. That is that one. That module is a little bit shorter. Make sure you read through the module. And we'll go from there. There's also some additional videos I'd highly recommend watching this week. One, like just for example, Joshua 4 meets feats of memory anyone can do is a really good one. Kind of gives some extreme things of examples of memory and how we can kind of cultivate a better memory. The crash courses are also really good for the memory to kind of help build in this idea, these information that we're learning. Yeah, just kind of take a look at those, sort of kind of go through them, and that should kind of reinforce and help you to recall this information that we're learning about memory. So make sure you do the quizzes, and other than that, until I see you next time in the next video. The next video, we're going to be looking at forgetting, memory construction, and improving memory. So that might be the time to watch that one on the feats of memory. But anyway, with all that to say, have a great day, evening, morning, whatever, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day. We'll see you.